Have you ever sat in a meeting, watching someone who clearly doesn't understand the problem speak with dazzling confidence, while the quiet person who solved it sits unnoticed? You've seen it in politics too. The candidate who shouts slogans wins the crowd, while the thoughtful one fades into silence. And in your own life, you've probably felt the disorienting mix of anger and disbelief as someone less capable rises above you, celebrated as a leader, while real competence hides in the shadows. You tell yourself it's a mistake, an exception, an unlucky accident. But what if it isn't? What if this keeps happening, not because the system is broken, but because it is working exactly as it was built? Imagine yourself standing in a crowded square, 2,000 years ago in Athens. The air hums with debate. Ordinary citizens raise their voices, casting votes for the men who will guide the city. They believe they are choosing wisdom. They believe they are shaping the future. Yet Aristotle watches quietly from the edge, and what he sees unsettles him. The people are not selecting the most brilliant or the most virtuous. They are choosing those who make them feel safe. Familiar faces, soothing promises, confident tones. Even then, the pattern you still see today was already alive. This is where your inner contradiction begins. On one hand, you've been taught since childhood that the best rise to the top, that society rewards skill, intelligence, and integrity. On the other, you've lived enough to see the opposite. Fools elevated, visionaries ignored, mediocrity enthroned. Which reality is true? Or are they both illusions? You can feel the tension inside you. The hope that someone wiser is steering the ship versus the creeping suspicion that no one is. Every headline about a leader's blunder, every workplace decision that rewards charisma over competence, every moment of watching noise drown out substance pushes you closer to a realization you're not sure you want. Because if the wrong people rise to power again and again, what does that say about the crowd that lifts them up? And what does it say about you? Your choices, your instincts, your role in the pattern. You stand in that mental agora now, just as Aristotle once did, surrounded by voices promising safety, progress, identity. Which do you trust? The one who speaks hardest truths, or the one who mirrors your fears back to you in comforting language? You think you choose reason, but do you? Here lies the paradox that this journey will unearth. Society claims to want excellence, but rewards familiarity. It speaks of progress, but clings to safety. It praises truth, but crowns performance. And the people you call idiots in power may not be accidents of a flawed system, but necessary features of a living organism trying to keep itself alive. This is where your questions begin to multiply, where the ground beneath your assumptions starts to shift. Why does the crowd prefer the fool? Why does brilliance so often stay silent? And if the system isn't broken, what is it really designed to do? These are not easy questions, but once you ask them, you can never unask them. And now you're ready to step beyond the square, to follow Aristotle's gaze deeper into the hidden roots of this pattern that shapes your leaders, your communities, even your own choices. Step closer to that ancient square in your mind. You still see the crowd, but now you begin to sense something beneath the surface. It isn't simply noise and slogans. It's an invisible force older than Athens, older than democracy itself, that moves people without their noticing. Aristotle called it ethos and pathos, the pull of trust and emotion. Modern psychologists give it other names: tribal instinct, cognitive bias, social conditioning, but you feel it in your own chest every time you hesitate to speak a hard truth at work, every time you laugh at a joke you don't find funny just to belong. This is the hidden current that explains why fools rise and wisdom falls silent. Think about what belonging meant to your ancestors. For most of human history, being cast out of the tribe meant death. No food, no fire, no protection. Your nervous system still carries that memory. When you see someone who looks like you, talks like you, reassures you, your body relaxes. When you see someone different, someone too intense, too visionary, too challenging, your body tenses. You tell yourself you're evaluating their ideas, but first you're evaluating your safety. We are not thinking machines who feel, neuroscientist Antonio Damasio wrote. We are feeling machines who think. Now apply that to leadership. The crowd does not consciously say, "We want the less competent one." Instead, millions of nervous systems search for safety signals, for mirrors of their identity. The charismatic manager, the politician with the easy smile, the influencer who speaks in simple, comforting phrases. These signals override logic because logic evolved later. Survival came first. Aristotle sensed this long before neuroscience. Watching the citizens of Athens, he saw that logos, the realm of reason, was the weakest of the three forces of persuasion. Pathos and ethos, emotion and credibility, ruled every vote. You know this pattern from your own life. Remember the last time you hesitated to share an unpopular opinion because you feared alienating others. Remember how you felt drawn to someone who seemed confident, even when you doubted their substance. In those moments, you are not defective. You are human. The same force that once kept your ancestors alive now shapes your choices of leaders, colleagues, even friends. And as long as this force remains unconscious, it will continue to elevate performers over thinkers, mirrors over architects. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche warned, madness is rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, nations, and ages, it is the rule. He was not insulting humanity. He was naming this collective instinct. A group's first priority is to remain a group. Cohesion over truth, familiarity over excellence. Aristotle reached the same conclusion with gentler words. The best regime is the one that fits its people. He meant that societies select leaders, not to maximize brilliance, but to minimize threat. You can already feel how deep this runs. It is not just in elections or boardrooms. It is in classrooms where the loud child dominates discussion while the thoughtful one stays quiet. It is in friendships where the storyteller becomes the center while the listener shapes everything silently from the edge. It is in you when you downplay your insight to avoid seeming too much. Each time this happens, the pattern reinforces itself. The crowd rewards the performance. The quiet withdraws, and soon the performance becomes leadership. At this point, you might feel a rising discomfort. If the system rewards comfort over competence, then perhaps the idiots in power you resent are not freak accidents, but predictable outcomes. And if that is true, then you, too, are part of the mechanism. You are both the chooser and the chosen, the silent voter in the square and the overlooked thinker on the edge. This is not a moral failing. It is an evolutionary inheritance. But it has consequences you have barely begun to see. Modern psychology calls this the status quo bias. We prefer what we already know, even when better options exist, because uncertainty feels dangerous. Combine that with the halo effect, our tendency to assume that confident or attractive people are also confident, and you have a recipe that has repeated itself for millennia. The crowd elevates the familiar. The familiar often lacks depth. The system survives another day. Progress waits. Aristotle, standing in that crowded square, could not yet name cognitive biases or neural circuits. But he saw the same outcome you see now. He realized that leadership in a democracy would always be less about wisdom than about resonance. Leaders who are too far ahead risk rejection, like a foreign organ. Leaders who reflect the group's self-image, however shallow, are embraced. This is the hidden problem. Society does not select for excellence. It selects for survival signals. And because this mechanism is invisible to most people, they call its results chaos, corruption, or stupidity. But what if it is none of those things? What if it is a design older than any constitution, older than politics itself? You stand again in the mental agora, feeling that realization dawn. It is not just them. It is you, your instincts, your neighbors, your culture. The force is inside you as much as outside you. And until you see it clearly, you cannot step outside it. Yet sensing it is only the beginning. Because once you glimpse the mechanism, another, more unsettling question begins to form. If this force silently shapes every choice, what unseen consequences does it create in your world, your work, your life? That is where we must go next, into the shadows, where this instinct quietly builds the reality you live in every day. You've started to glimpse the hidden mechanism, the ancient instinct for safety over brilliance. But what does it actually do to your life and to the world around you? What happens when the crowd elevates the familiar and filters out the extraordinary? Decade after decade, generation after generation? You probably feel the answer even before you can name it. It is in the frustration you carry at work. It is in the headlines you read every morning. It is in the quiet resignation of the most capable people you know. Look at the organizations you've passed through. How many of them truly changed because of a bold new vision? How many slowed down, buried innovation under best practices and safe leaders? In those meetings where the loudest person set the direction, the unspoken message was clear. Don't move too fast, don't think too differently, don't risk the group's comfort. You may have told yourself it was just office politics, but Aristotle would tell you it is the same survival instinct at work, protecting the organism even if it starves its own future. And it doesn't stop at workplaces. In politics, this mechanism turns elections into theater. Candidates learn that detailed policies rarely win votes, but simple slogans do. People don't vote on plans, strategist James Carville once said. They vote on feelings. The result? Short-term popularity over long-term solutions. A leader who speaks hard truths about sacrifice is punished. A leader who promises painless change is rewarded. The cycle tightens. The wise withdraw. The stage performers multiply. And society drifts toward mediocrity, thinking it has chosen wisely. This is where the consequences become personal, because you are not just a bystander. Every time you reward the safe over the challenging, even in small ways, you feed the same dynamic. You like the influencer who entertains rather than the one who informs. You nod politely at the colleague who oversimplifies because it feels easier than wrestling with complexity. You hesitate to voice your real insight because you sense it might unsettle the group. And slowly, almost invisibly, you help construct a world where fools rise and thinkers retreat. Modern neuroscience explains why this feels so inevitable. Your amygdala, the part of the brain that scans for threat fires, not just at predators, but at ideas that feel foreign. Psychologists call this identity protective cognition. When a new proposal threatens your worldview, your brain experiences it like danger. It's not a metaphor. It's a stress response. Multiply that across millions of voters, employees, or citizens, and you have a system that unconsciously punishes visionaries and rewards safe faces, no matter how shallow. Aristotle intuited this long before MR is. He warned that societies which elevate only the familiar eventually mistake symbols for substance. Leaders become actors on a stage, projecting confidence, absorbing anger, and distracting from the fact that real decisions are made elsewhere. You can already see hints of this in your world. The CEO who is mostly a spokesperson while the board shapes strategy. The president who campaigns on ideals but governs within constraints set by donors and institutions. The front figure gives the crowd the illusion of control. Behind the curtain, the machinery keeps turning. This has another, quieter cost. It teaches the most capable people to step aside. Think of the researcher who leaves public policy because she is tired of slogans. Think of the engineer who stays in the lab rather than fighting for leadership. Think of yourself, holding back your best idea because you've learned the crowd will not welcome it. Over time, These small retreats hollow out a culture. The very people who could move it forward have already decided it isn't worth the fight. The organism survives, but it stops evolving. Here lies the deeper tragedy Aristotle hinted at. The crowd doesn't just reject brilliance. It slowly conditions brilliance to hide. And once that happens, mediocrity stops being an accident and becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The system protects its comfort at the cost of its potential. It survives today, but it forgets how to imagine tomorrow. You may feel a tightening in your chest as you realize this, because it isn't just the system out there. It's the habits inside you, the instincts in your nervous system, the choices in your daily life. The unseen consequence of elevating the familiar is that you build a world where familiarity is all that's left. But if this mechanism is that deep, that old, that rooted in human nature, does that mean it's unbreakable? Are you doomed to watch fools rule while wisdom stays silent forever? Or is there a way to step out of the pattern, to rebel against the instinct, to build a new rhythm for society and for yourself? That is the question you now stand before the threshold Aristotle leaves you at. The moment where you stop blaming and start asking, what if I refuse the script? What if I learn to see differently? You stand at the threshold now. You've peered behind the curtain and glimpsed the gears turning. You've seen how instinct shapes the crowd, how comfort beats brilliance, how the system elevates actors over architects. And yet, even as you recognize it, a question burns inside you. Must it stay this way? Most people never reach this point. They stop at cynicism, complaining about idiots in power, while continuing to feed the same dynamic with their attention, their votes, their silence. But you have gone further. You've seen the pattern for what it is. And that means you stand at the edge of rebellion, not against people, but against a way of seeing. The first act of rebellion is not to fight the crowd, but to free your own perception. You cannot escape an instinct you haven't named. Now you've named it. You felt its pull in your own nervous system, watched it in your workplace, recognized it in your society. That awareness alone begins to break its spell. The psychologist Viktor Frankl wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose." You are learning to widen that space, to pause when your amygdala flares at a new idea, to ask, am I rejecting this because it is wrong, or because it feels unfamiliar? This is how rebellion begins, with small acts of self-honesty. When a quiet colleague speaks, you give them your full attention instead of the loud one. When you sense a leader playing to your fears, you ask for evidence instead of applause. When your own ideas scare people, you stay patient instead of shrinking. Each of these moments chips away at the reflex that props up mediocrity. But rebellion is also collective. History shows that societies can elevate visionaries when enough people learn to translate complexity into simplicity. Think of Abraham Lincoln, who condensed the Civil War's moral stakes into the plain language of the Gettysburg Address. Think of Marie Curie, who navigated suspicion to open a new field of science. Think of Václav Havel, the playwright turned president who used metaphors, not manifestos, to lead a revolution. They were brilliant, but they also learned to speak so the crowd could follow without panic. They slowed their ideas just enough for others to grasp, without betraying their essence. This is the paradox Aristotle left unspoken. To lead, even the wise must practice a kind of translation. They must be bridges, not just beacons. Many refuse, valuing authenticity over influence, and so they remain in the shadows. But some learn the art of resonance, not by dumbing down their ideas, but by meeting the audience where it is. In that act of empathy, brilliance can survive the crowd's instinct to reject it. For you, this means another shift. Stop waiting for better leaders to appear fully formed. Start becoming one in the small circles you touch. In your team, your family, your community, you can model a different rhythm. Patience with complexity, courage with truth, generosity with difference. Each time you do, you loosen the ancient grip a little more. You show others that safety and vision can coexist, that a leader can challenge without alienating. It also means changing how you consume leadership. When you reward depth instead of spectacle, when you share work that enlightens rather than entertains, when you give your attention to those who speak with substance instead of slogans, you vote with your mind. The stage only survives if the audience stays. Stop clapping for the actor, and the script begins to crumble. And perhaps most radical of all, you can redefine success for yourself. Aristotle wrote in the Nicomachean Ethics that the highest human calling was not power, but eudaimonia, human flourishing. When you choose mastery over manipulation, creation over control, truth over applause, you step out of the game designed to reward appearances. You stop being bait for the system's reflexes. You become a free node in the network, a person who cannot be easily managed by fear or flattery. This is not easy. It asks you to stand apart sometimes, to tolerate discomfort, to speak when silence would be safer. But it is the only way the pattern changes one nervous system at a time, one small circle at a time. Every time you act from clarity instead of instinct, you make it easier for someone else to do the same. This is how cultural tipping points begin, invisibly, quietly, and all at once. So the rebellion is not a riot in the streets. It is an inner revolution, a slow rewiring of what you reward, what you listen to, what you dare to become. It is the courage to say, I will not mirror mediocrity. I will not crown the familiar over the true. And as you begin to live this way, a strange thing happens. The idiots in power stop feeling inevitable. They start looking like what they are, symbols of a stage you are no longer watching. And in their place, space opens for something else, something more real to emerge. You stand at that edge now. You have learned to see the mechanism. You have glimpsed the path of rebellion. But there is one more step, one deeper realization, waiting beyond the horizon of truth that will not only change how you see leaders, but how you see power itself. You've walked through the square, through the crowd's instinct, through the hidden machinery of survival. You've glimpsed your own part in it, and you've begun to rebel in small ways. But something even larger now waits in the distance, like a horizon you could never reach. It's the question that has been whispering behind everything you've read so far. If the leaders we see are just actors on a stage, then who is writing the script? This is the final paradox Aristotle leaves you with. The people you mock as idiots in power may not actually be steering the ship at all. They may be the mask society wears to calm itself. They smile, they reassure, they absorb the noise. Behind them, invisible networks of incentives, institutions, and unspoken agreements shape what they can and cannot do. In Athens, it was wealthy patrons, laws, and tradition. Today, it's donors, boards, bureaucracies, and the slow gravity of public opinion. The actor changes, the stage evolves, but the play remains the same. When you see this clearly, you stop imagining power as a throne you can seize. You start seeing it as a function, a relationship, a flow. In a living organism, the heart is not the boss of the body. It's a rhythm keeper. So too with leaders. They hold the collective together, but the deeper currents, culture, values, economic forces, unconscious instincts are what actually move history. The idiot in power is not a glitch, but a signal. The system wants stability more than progress, belonging more than brilliance. And until that deep current changes, every leader, no matter how capable, will be bent to its shape. This realization can feel bleak at first. It's tempting to despair, to believe nothing matters because the script is already written. But that's not Aristotle's lesson. His warning was not a prophecy of doom. It was an invitation to maturity, to stop believing in saviors, to stop outsourcing your agency to a face on a stage. To recognize that power is not a person but a pattern, and that patterns change when enough individuals change their rhythms. This is where your journey circles back to you. You've learned to see the instinct, to rebel against it in small ways, to translate complexity into simplicity. Now you discover the deeper truth. The real power has never been at the top. It has always been distributed in norms and networks, in choices like yours. Every time you reward depth over spectacle, every time you speak when silence would be safer, every time you teach someone else to question their reflexes, you are not just being a better citizen. You are rewriting the script. Aristotle called the highest life one of phronesis, practical wisdom, and eudaimonia, flourishing. Not the life of a ruler, but of a free and virtuous person. In his view, the most excellent rarely sought office because their fulfillment lay elsewhere. In learning, creating, mentoring, building, loving. In modern terms, they stopped waiting for permission to lead from a podium. They led in the invisible ways that actually shape the organism's future. This is the final, uncomfortable, liberating truth. The stage at the front is an illusion. The actors do not hold the pen. You do. Culture writes its own script through millions of daily choices. What you pay attention to, what you amplify, what you tolerate, what you demand. The idiots in power are not the source of the problem. They are the mirror. Change the reflection, and the mask will fall away. So when you look at your world now, at your workplace, your community, your country, see it with new eyes. Stop asking only, why are they so foolish? Ask also, what part of me rewards this? What can I stop feeding? What can I start nurturing? In that moment, you step off the stage as an audience member and become a co-author. This does not mean the journey is finished. It means you have reached a higher vantage point. From here, your frustration becomes fuel. Your cynicism becomes clarity. And your clarity becomes action. Small, quiet, persistent. The kind that rewires instincts over time. That is how history really shifts. Not when one genius seizes a throne, but when many people unseen stop clapping for the old play and begin rehearsing a new one. Aristotle's warning is 2,000 years old, but it remains urgent because it is not about Athens. It is about you. About the choices you make when you consume information, when you choose your leaders, when you decide whether to speak or stay silent. About the courage to hold complexity without panic. About the patience to translate vision into language others can follow. About refusing to be hypnotized by the stage. And so this journey ends not with an answer, but with a challenge. You now know why society so often rewards fools with power. You know the mechanism, the cost, the rebellion, the truth. The question left is the one only you can answer. Now that you see the script, will you keep playing your part? Or will you begin to write a new one? Because once you have seen it, you can never unsee it.